Welcome to The Explainer, everyone. Today, we're taking a virtual road trip through some of the most breathtaking scenery on Earth. We are heading to Norway. But, we aren't just here for the stunning fjords and mountains. We're actually here to decode the country's incredibly unique and honestly, sometimes invisible traffic laws. If you've ever thought driving was just about following the signs right in front of you, well, the Norwegian road system is going to completely change your perspective. When I first started looking into this, my whole view changed. Understanding these rules isn't just about passing some test, it's this fascinating look at how to fundamentally read the environment around you.
So, I want to start off with a pretty serious question. Could you lose your driver's license today? Think about it. If you were dropped behind the wheel in Norway right now without understanding the implicit rules of their roads, the answer might actually be yes. The financial and legal stakes for drivers there are incredibly high, and ignorance of the law is literally never an excuse. In a lot of places, you just look for a sign to tell you what to do, right? Well, in Norway, the absence of a sign is often just as important as the presence of one. You're literally expected to read the landscape.
Okay, let's dive into this foundational concept. Standard speed limits in Norway serve as the absolute baseline for road safety when there are no specific signs telling you otherwise. And these defaults are strictly divided into two primary categories. It's 50 kilometers per hour for urban areas and 80 kilometers per hour for rural areas. Understanding those two numbers is absolutely critical. Why? Because you're legally responsible for adhering to them even when there are absolutely no signs posted for miles. The whole system places the responsibility entirely on your shoulders as the driver to recognize the environment and just automatically apply the correct speed limit.
So how does this actually work in practice? Like, how do you know you're in an urban area if there's literally no sign? Well, you have to look for the clues. A built-up area is characterized by the environment itself. Are there houses clustered along the road? Are there shops, industrial buildings? Maybe you see pedestrians or cyclists. If you spot these environmental clues, you're legally required to automatically drop your speed to 50 kilometers per hour. You don't wait for a sign to give you permission to slow down. The second you enter a residential or commercial zone, boom, that 50 limit applies. It's specifically designed to protect vulnerable road users who are sharing that exact space with you.
Now, transitioning out to the beautiful countryside. Outside of those built-up areas, the general speed limit defaults to 80 kilometers per hour. This applies to most country roads and highways where no other limit is posted. But here's the catch, and it's a huge one. 80 kilometers per hour is a maximum allowed speed. It is absolutely not a target. Norwegian geography is notoriously challenging. You're dealing with really narrow roads, incredibly sharp curves, and highly variable weather conditions. So driving 80 on a winding, narrow rural road just because it's the legal default maximum, that could be incredibly dangerous and frankly often just impossible. The safe speed is frequently significantly lower than that legal maximum.
Now, what's really interesting here is a massive trap for foreigners. You might see a gray circular sign with diagonal black lines across it. In some countries, a similar sign means unlimited speed, kind of like on parts of the German Autobahn. But no way in Norway, this sign does not mean unlimited speed. It simply indicates that the road is returning to the general default limits we just talked about. So if you're in a 60 zone and you pass a gray 60 sign with diagonal lines, your limit immediately reverts back to 80 if you're in a rural area or 50 if you happen to be in an urban area. Misunderstanding this single rule can easily get you into some serious trouble.
Usually, speed limits in Norway are communicated through standard circular signs with a red border, and that limit applies until you see a new circular sign. But contrast that with the rectangular zone signs you'll often run into in residential neighborhoods. These establish a strict lower limit of 30 or 40 kilometers per hour. The key difference here is that these zone signs apply to an entire area and they are not repeated at every intersection. Once you pass that 30 zone sign, you're locked into that limit for every single street within that neighborhood, right up until you physically pass a sign explicitly marking the end of zone. And, these areas also frequently feature physical speed humps to naturally enforce that slower pace.
So this brings us to a fundamental pillar of Norwegian traffic law, which is often called the basic rule of speed. The law explicitly states that you must always adjust your speed according to the requirements of the site, the visibility, the condition of the road, and the traffic. And guys, this isn't just good advice, it's a strict legal requirement. This means that even if the sign clearly says 80 kilometers per hour, if you're driving 80 during a thick, heavy snowstorm or dense fog, you can absolutely be pulled over and cited for a traffic violation. The law actually dictates you must be able to stop completely within the distance of the road you can clearly see ahead of you.
Building on that basic rule, there are highly specific situations that trigger an immediate legal requirement to reduce your speed completely regardless of what the posted sign says. Just imagine driving and suddenly approaching pedestrians or cyclists on the shoulder, or maybe entering a sharp curve with an obstructed view, or driving past a school, a playground, or a busy bus stop. Picture meeting oncoming traffic on a really narrow mountain road, or encountering slippery conditions like black ice, or hey, even just wet leaves in the autumn. Even passing an accident site or roadwork requires this. In every single one of these unpredictable scenarios, the law demands you slow down instantly to adapt to the hazard.
Let's briefly shift gears to high-speed travel. On major Norwegian motorways, known as motorvei, the speed limits are higher, typically clearly signed at 100 or 110 kilometers per hour. But that principle of adaptive speed, it never goes away. Norway's high-speed roads heavily utilize variable electronic speed limit signs. These aren't your typical static painted signs. They're constantly updated by centralized traffic control centers in real time. They're responding to accidents, heavy traffic volume, or suddenly poor weather conditions. As a driver, you must constantly adapt and strictly follow whatever number is currently illuminated on the electronic sign right above you.
And this brilliantly illustrates how deeply contextual the rules are. If you're towing a trailer, your speed limits change drastically, based purely on physics. For example, if you're driving a car with a trailer that doesn't have brakes, your absolute maximum speed drops to 80 kilometers per hour, even if the motorway sign is practically screaming 110. Furthermore, if that unbraked trailer weighs over 300 kilograms and the road happens to be slippery, your legal limit plunges all the way down to 60 kilometers per hour. The Norwegian authorities strictly enforce this, simply because the stopping distance and the stability of a vehicle dragging a trailer change profoundly at higher speeds, making it vastly more dangerous.
So, the crucial point here is understanding the consequences. We've talked about implicit rules, environmental clues, and adaptive speeds. But what happens if you miss these clues? What happens if you get it wrong? Well, Norway maintains an incredibly strict enforcement policy regarding speed. The penalties are not just a slap on the wrist, they are severe, and they're explicitly designed to be a massive deterrent. Let's look at exactly how high the stakes really are.
I want you to really anchor this terrifying number in your mind: 76. In an urban built-up area, where that default speed is 50 kilometers per hour, being caught driving at exactly 76 kilometers per hour triggers a massive penalty. It actually results in the immediate, roadside seizure of your driver's license. The police will simply take it right then and there, your trip is over, done. It's a pretty stark reminder of why recognizing those unmarked built-up zones we discussed earlier is so incredibly vital.
And here is the threshold for the rural areas. If you're in an 80 kilometers per hour zone, hitting 116 kilometers per hour will result in that exact same immediate license seizure. But beyond just losing your license, it's super important to know that Norway's financial fines are significantly higher than in many other countries. And they're calculated strictly based on the exact margin by which you exceed the limit. Every single kilometer over the limit directly increases the pain in your wallet. And let's just say, Norwegian fines are absolutely not for the faint of heart.
And hey, don't think you can simply rely on keeping an eye out for police cruisers. Norway relies extensively on automated traffic cameras, known as ASTK. These things are deployed all across the country, and they don't just measure your instantaneous speed right as you pass the camera. The system is actually designed to track your average speed over long distances. So they report your time at point A and your time at point B miles down the road, and calculate your exact average speed between the two. You absolutely cannot just hit the brakes for the camera and speed back up. They'll catch you every time.
So, this brings us to a final thought to leave you with today. In a system where the environment dictates the rules, where the total absence of a sign implies a specific legal maximum, and whether weather dictates your legal limits, you really have to ask yourself, are you driving by the signs, or are you truly reading the road? Because in Norway, situational awareness and reading the landscape isn't just a good defensive driving technique, it is the law. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep your eyes open, read the road, and safe travels.